You're looking at a massive granite slab carved with a story about a prince chosen by the gods. But was he? The Dream Stele of ancient Egypt is one of those fantastic historical mysteries, a real puzzle of power, politics, and maybe, just maybe, murder. Right there, tucked between the giant paws of the giant Sphinx of Giza, lies the central clue in our mystery. This thing was put up way back in 1401 BC, and it's not just some old rock. It's a key piece of evidence in a historical cold case that, to this day, isn't quite solved. All right, let's journey back to that time, 1401 BC. We're going to focus on this young prince, a guy named Thutmose IV. He wasn't king yet, but he was about to have an experience that would completely change his destiny, and honestly the whole course of Egyptian history. So the story on the stone goes like this. Thutmose is out in the desert, hunting from his chariot with horses that were, and I quote, swifter than the wind. Around midday, he gets tired and decides to take a break from the sun. And where does he stop? Right in the shadow of the Great Sphinx, which at the time was almost completely buried in sand. All you could really see was its head. And while he's sleeping, something pretty wild happens. The inscription says he heard the majesty of this revered god speaking with his own mouth, as a father speaks with his son. So in his dream, the Sphinx itself, which is a form of the god Hora-Makhet, starts talking to him. And this is the absolute heart of the inscription. This wasn't just some random dream. This was a divine conversation, and it came with a pretty unbelievable offer on the table. I mean, listen to the words they carved into this stone. The Sphinx straight up says, "I'm your divine father, and I will give to thee my kingdom." Think about that. Not just a title, but the entire kingdom, rule over all of Upper and Lower Egypt. But there's always a catch, right? This divine gift had a condition. The Sphinx complains about being buried, saying it's ailing in all my limbs. So the deal was simple. Thutmose, you clear away all this sand that's suffocating me, and in return, the throne of Egypt, it's all yours. A little bit of manual labor for the ultimate prize. So, when Thutmose woke up, he did exactly what the god told him to do. He excavated the Sphinx, and just like the dream promised, he became pharaoh. And then he put up this very stele to tell everyone about it. But this is where the story starts to get a little complicated. And this brings us right to the big question that's been bugging historians for more than 100 years. Was this a genuine divine message foretelling his rise to power? Or was it something else, something much more calculated, like a masterful piece of political propaganda? So you've got two completely different ways to look at this. On the one hand, you can take it at face value. It was a true spiritual moment. But on the other hand, you have the more cynical view that this was a story made up after Thutmose was already king to make his rule look like it was destined by the gods. So let's go down that propaganda rabbit hole for a minute, because it leads us to a pretty dark idea known as the usurper pharaoh theory. This theory basically suggests that Thutmose IV was never supposed to be the heir, and that he might have seized power under some, well, very suspicious circumstances. And the evidence for this is actually pretty compelling. First off, most Egyptologists agree Thutmose probably wasn't the crown prince. He had at least one older brother ahead of him in line. Second, and you gotta ask yourself this, if you're the rightful heir, why do you need this big public story about a god promising you the throne? Your claim should already be rock solid. And maybe the most damning evidence of all, archaeologists found other monuments where the names of his older brothers had been carefully, intentionally chiseled away, just erased from history. Yeah, this interpretation of the evidence is chilling. The historian Salim Hassan, when he was looking at those erased names, he did not mince words. He suggested that Thutmose's older brothers stood in the way of his ambitions, and that he may have, removed them to get the throne. That's a serious accusation. But hold on. Before we convict him in the court of history, there's a huge piece of context we have to look at. Making up stories about being chosen by the gods was actually a pretty common move for pharaohs in this era. Powerful rulers like Hatshepsut and even Thutmose's own dad used really similar stories to make their own rules seem legitimate. So what does that mean for our mystery? Well, it means that while the Dream Stele story is definitely suspicious, we can't use it as the smoking gun. He might have just been playing the game, following a family tradition of royal PR. The case is far from closed. But what if both of these theories, the divine prophecy and the political propaganda, are wrong? What if the key to this whole 3,400-year-old mystery isn't in theology or politics, but in modern neuroscience? Back in 2012, a surgeon proposed this fascinating new theory. It's centered on a condition called familial temporal epilepsy. Now, it's a genetic disorder, it runs in families, and what's crucial for our story is that it's known to cause seizures that come with these intense, vivid spiritual or religious visions. So, a Dr. Houghton Ashrafian suggested that maybe this condition was running through the 18th dynasty royal family. This could explain why so many of these pharaohs died young, guys like the Thutmose IV, Akhenaten, and even King Tut. And here's the kicker. It would give us a biological explanation for Thutmose's dream, his vision of the Sphinx talking to him. It might not have been a dream, a prophecy, or a lie at all, but a seizure. So at the end of the day, we're left with this incredible puzzle. Who was Thutmose? Was he a ruthless usurper who made up a brilliant cover story for his crimes? Was he a genuinely pious prince chosen by a god? Or was he a man with a medical condition, whose brain chemistry created an event that was seen as divine will, setting him on a path to become one of the most powerful people on the planet? The stele just stands there, silent, leaving us to wonder.